Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
Hello, everybody. Welcome inside of Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast. I am Ryan Buckeye alongside Josh Shaw here with more functional conversation. Let's just call it that. Functional conversation. We've had an episode talking about functional foods, and that's a big thing which Josh does a lot of as well, and I spent time in that area. But maybe a larger part, or at least within the sports nutrition industry, has been the functional beverages. And we've talked at length about Bang, but there's plenty of different energy drinks out there. But it's not just energy drinks. There are different drinks out in major markets that we don't necessarily see here in sports nutrition that are functional beverages that are super interesting to talk about. And I think it's a good conversation for us to have today in terms of, like, where did functional beverages start? Where are they currently at, and where do we think they're going to go? Because I think there's a lot of new products coming to market. It's just part of the problem, Josh, is like a lot of these functional beverages, they just don't know how to market them, I think, to the consumer. Like, why would the consumer buy anything that's not going to give them a feeling? Or, I mean, when you think of a canned beverage or just a beverage in general, what's the number one functional benefit you look for? Typically, it's energy.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's obviously what you're talking about, like with the sensory type of a feeling with the product, but more times than not, and we didn't touch on this when we talked about the food part, but beverage more than anything else is a lot of times around like distribution and scale, because you're moving around water, which is essentially free, in America. So you don't want to move around water because that takes away all of your margins. So like if you don't have the proper sales channel, distribution, all those types of things lined up, you tend to then be working against the wave. And it's hard for you to sell things online or sell things, especially if you don't have a ton of margin built into this. So I totally agree with you. I think the sales story, getting the end consumer to understand maybe why they should purchase this over a ready to mix powder or something that maybe has a more efficacious dose of what they're talking about. Then I think there's also like the aspect of just distribution, scale, and beverages usually die around that over them not being able to communicate properly, like the sales story or like the functionality within the product.
Yeah, and I think if we look at kind of like the history of functional beverages in general, I mean, it starts, I don't know. Like, I feel like it almost starts with like just soda in general. Like, there's caffeine in soda, and the functional benefit there is alertness and increased energy. Granted, it's filled with a bunch of other stuff, but like Coke was one of the first sodas. There's probably one before that. I don't know the complete history, but I've got to imagine like that would be considered a functional benefit today. Energy is. But I think what we're going to kind of focus on in this episode is not just like, okay, just because it has caffeine, was there an elevated level of caffeine? That would then become more of like a functional beverage. But do you recall, outside of like your Mountain Dews, your Pepsis and stuff, do you remember what your first sort of functional beverage in your life might have been?
I mean, I guess if we're not considering like the carbonated soft drinks, because I'm thinking back to like Surge. I don't know if you had.
Who hasn't had Surge? Yeah.
Like back in middle school.
Yeah.
That was quite the tasty beverage. I looked back recently at some of the macros and stuff around there, and I was surprised at how much sugar was in there. I was like, man, I was slugging those things down in like 2 liters like it was my job.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it was probably, if we're kind of focusing in on more of the caffeine side of this conversation at the beginning, I think it would probably be Red Bull in college. And it was, I think the first time maybe I had it was in a bar. It wasn't in a can. I think it was just somebody ordered a Red Bull vodka, or it could have been Jaeger or something like that. And that was kind of my introduction into energy drinks. And then after that, I was like, oh, what are these things? And then it's kind of like, let's go buy it at a 7-Eleven. And then that just kind of went down a slippery slope where now I know I drink one almost every day, and I think you do as well. So it's like pretty much part of our lifestyle now. Yeah.
I mean, Red Bull, if they weren't the first, they were the first to make it cool or popular, I guess, I think, in terms of an energy drink. They were small can, was it like 8 ounces? But they decided to market it completely different. They went into bars And as sort of like alcohol is a depressant. Let's lift you up. Let's make sure that you can last all night. Vodka Red Bull, baby. Vodka Jaeger. Yeah. Jaeger bombs. You guys know how it is. Like that's what it was. But Red Bull, and those listening to this can correct me if I'm wrong. I think Red Bull came before Rockstar, came before Monster, and then Rockstar and Monster kind of came after the fact when they saw the popularity of Red Bull. And I'm sure there's someone out there who's much smarter than I am that's thinking like, nah, before Red Bull there was this, and you're probably right. There might have been, but Red Bull was the first company that I think in my recollection that made it popular to where you walked into a gas station and right next to the Coke and Pepsi, then you had a full cooler of Red Bull, and people out there can argue saying like, well, Gatorade's kind of a functional beverage. Sure. Okay. But I mean, when you talk about like the carbonated series, I think Red Bull would be Red Bull for me, I think is ultimately most likely the first one that I had to. It was either Red Bull or 5 Hour Energy, which isn't necessarily a beverage, but it's like a liquid shot. And it had to be one or the other. And I can't necessarily, I don't remember which one it was. But again, it was just an elevated level of caffeine. And I don't know about you, Josh, but I thought Red Bull tasted like shit. I don't like the taste of Red Bull today. I think it smells awful. And people were drinking this stuff like crazy, especially in college, man. And you pop an Adderall and you drink a Red Bull and you study, and you go do your final exams. And I'm just like, what are you drinking? And I try it. I'm like, this is gross. This is disgusting.
That base flavor was, still it's one of the most popular energy drinks. Like just their basic original flavor is the number one, I think, seller still in the U.S. In the energy drink market. So people like that taste. I think it's an acquired taste.
Do they like it or do they just get it on the cheap? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. But Red Bull's always like pretty price like premium wise, like because they're so focused on their brand. I think you can get much cheaper rock stars or monsters at this point, and they taste much different. They do still have that same original flavor as well, but I don't think that those do as well as like the ultra monsters or things like that. But to kind of get us off the track of energy drinks, we talked about but we could kind of focus a little bit on energy as a category, like with coffee being kind of like a functional beverage, and that being maybe the original one in this whole kind of spectrum. If we're talking about things that maybe aren't just the extra vitamin D added milk or extra whatever put into orange juice like that, we're not going back to that level because that's really not in the context of 2020. That's not really a functional beverage for people. If you say, hey, what functional beverages do you drink? They're not going to be like, oh, I drink, vitamin fortified milk. That's not what they're going to be talking about. But I kind of also was thinking about, outside of the U.S., we were a little bit late to all this because Red Bull started, in Austria, or I think that's where it was at. But they didn't come over until like the late mid 90s. But you think even like Eastern medicine and things around like these different like elixirs with adaptogens or herbs or botanicals or whatever they were putting in this like seeped tea, and they were serving it to people, like those were like where this all came from. And we've finally like transitioned back to this now with like packaged beverages and not having to actually know how to make these things in the proper ways, like actually just being able to like grab one off the rack of a convenience store or a grocery store, and you can get some level of degree of what those people were consuming, thousands of years ago, probably. Yeah,
and I think back to just like, to revert back here in terms of what my first functional beverage was, it might not even been an energy drink. It might have been like the Tetra Pak, from Muscle Milk, when Muscle Milk used to make the Tetra Paks before they went into that. Protein shakes have been around for a while.
Yeah,
which is a functional beverage too. So I know our minds like to go to Bang and these energy drink markets and stuff, but honestly, it might have been a Muscle Milk for me, or Monster Milk when they had those out. That might have been before even Red Bull in my case. But the history of functional beverages have been there, and I think what's really enticed people to get into this space is the rise of certain brands like Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar. They rose quickly and they made a lot of money. Monster made a ton of money for Coke. Red Bull, is Red Bull by itself? Are they owned by Pepsi?
Yeah, they're by themselves.
Yeah. You can look at the Nielsen data and just see like year over year how quickly this stuff grew. And I think you posted, or you were looking for maybe IRI data recently on Bang, and like Bang is just crazy growth for Bang. I mean, you see it everywhere now. You see it in Costco. So it's like from the outside looking in, like why wouldn't you want a piece of the pie? But the problem with that is then too is like now everybody wants to do an energy drink. Everybody wants to get into the energy drink game. And I see dietary nutritional supplement companies all the time tease a new energy drink or tease this drink in the space. It's like, what are you going to do that's different? Like, I mean, Jack and Bang, they approach the energy drink market differently. Red Bull became an entertainment company. Okay, they started doing things like I can't even pronounce it, but they had like the crashed ice stuff, and they had like a movie studio, and they had all these different sports. Like it wasn't a beverage; it was an entertainment company. Bang approached it as like we're a sex company. Like we sell sex, and like in terms of you go to the booth, it's high energy, it's EDM music, it's women. So they weren't selling a beverage; they were selling an experience. You know, we talk about that quite a bit here. So that's the toughest part about getting into that realm. And I know we heard the word, or we use the word, or hear the word all the time, Josh, that that's oversaturated. The energy drink market is oversaturated.
Yeah.
Is that true?
You know, I don't necessarily think it is. I mean, the growth rates in the category as a whole, I think are still upwards of close to 10% year over year. And this is a mature beverage category. So this isn't like, you know, just starting out. This is I think, $12 or $13 billion US market for energy drinks. So if you have that type of growth, there's more people coming into the category. I think energy drinks used to be a fringe thing. It used to be something that like partiers or people that you didn't want to associate drank. And now it's like you see them in boardrooms, you see them around everywhere. It's just an extension of coffee in a lot of senses. Like for me, I don't drink coffee because I don't like the bitter taste of coffee. It's just not a taste profile that I enjoy. So for me, drinking an energy drink in the morning is my coffee. It's just like, that's just what I like because the flavor profiles. And I think a lot of people are doing a similar switch. So now you're having a ton of people jump into the category, and there's a ton of people that have different kind of ideas of what an energy drink should look like or be like. And that's why you're starting to now see even bigger portfolios come out with the actual like trademark name of themselves, like with Coke Energy or a Pepsi Cafe or something like that, where they're basically not utilizing a sub brand. They're saying we're gonna put our most valuable asset out there with an energy drink and see how it goes. And that just proves that if these big guys are coming in there, they see opportunity. They don't jump in just because they want to compete for like a little of the slice of the pie. They see that there's more opportunity out there. So for me, I don't think it's saturated at all. I think it's becoming more competitive, but I definitely don't think it's one of those things where somebody's trying to compete against the same person and that's all that's left. There's a lot more people coming in and a lot more people that have like different ideas about what they want. So I definitely don't think it's ending anytime soon. So on our end, we're going to see a lot more people jumping into the ball game and saying, I want a piece of that, even if I'm getting scraps, because you made a point like beverages, or what we talked about in a previous episode with like foods, like these are relatable things. People are constantly obviously eating and drinking to survive. And it's not like you have to mix a powder or you have to take a pill or something like that. So the option of you getting like faster growth in terms of sales because you're more relatable is obviously there. Also, if you are an entrepreneur and you're thinking, well, I might want to sell my business one day, you get a much bigger multiple off of beverage and food brands than you do off of a supplement brand. So if you are somebody that's smart enough that wants to exit your business one day, you also look at those categories as an opportunity for you to be a little bit more richer if you ever cash your chips.
I agree with you. I think every time I heard the word oversaturation, I was like, but why? Like you mentioned, it's a 10% growth rate. There's room for people. You look at like the cereal market, because that's where I came from. It had like a 2.3% decline year over year. But you walk down the cereal aisle and there's still new players. There's still new stuff that comes into that all the time because it's still a very valuable category. It's still a ton of money. And you have, energy drinks on the rise just because when you think energy drink today, you think Red Bull, Bang, Monster, probably those three are your big ones. But there are also like many other ones that, within our category, right? Or within our industry who come out with energy drinks. So America Labs came out with America Energy, Rep Sports came out with Raise Energy. I know that there are several big brands that you and I both converse with on a daily basis that are playing an energy drink as well. These aren't dumb people. Like they recognize like what's going on. And they want a piece of the pie, and I think they can. But I find it interesting. It's like, okay, well, if you truly think the energy drink category is oversaturated, then which direction do you go? And there's a ton of great examples in the market today that I thought have approached the beverage category better than others, and in a way that's unique, where it's not just caffeine, but there's an actual separate functional benefit to it. And the one that I think maybe I've talked about on this podcast before, but that we've talked about, Josh, is like the company called FitAid. And FitAid is super interesting, and it's actually, I think in terms of functional beverages, I think it's one of the ones that's done better than most. And the reason being is they offer a wide variety of different functional beverages. Each beverage has a specific functional benefit to it. It's not at all energy. So I just pull up their website here. They have 2 recover drinks. They have a balance drink, a focus drink, a revive drink, a defend drink, a perform drink, a thrive drink. They also have a hangover drink. Like, these are drinks that they made specifically for a want or need, and each one has its own prolific color to it. And I thought, and I see that Whole Foods carries them. They're in many other cool, unique grocery stores and some C stores as well. But they said, like, okay, what can we do in this market that nobody else is doing? And it's like, okay, we know that people suffer from hangovers, so let's make a hangover drink. We know that people want something that's going to improve their focus, so let's make a drink that includes those type of ingredients in it. And they have a plethora of brands, and I don't know how well they're doing when it comes to money, but I would anticipate the more and more I see them show up more and more. And I know they even have a CBD-infused drink now as well. So for me, if we're going to talk about like some personal favorites in 2020, the FitAid brand is one of, I think, the more well-done functional beverages in the market that we don't really talk about in sports nutrition, or even you and I talk about on this podcast. We always talk about bang and bang and bang, but like there are some other companies out there doing some really cool things, and I think this might be my favorite one.
Yeah, I know those guys pretty well over the years. They were kind of fostered and began in the CrossFit world. So they really kind of listened to the community in the CrossFit world, and really was able to be one of the brands that kind of came from that area, similar to like RX bars, and was able to say, like, we're going to produce products that are specific to, at that time, probably like bleeding edge workout people. I mean, those people were like the affluent, kind of trendy people. And if you're going to listen to somebody and you're going to be looking at a beverage brand for the long haul, that's probably a good audience to listen to. So they were able to really like create some really unique products that had a bunch of different like herbs and botanicals and things in there. I would say their taste has really like gotten better over the years, and that's helped their product as a whole. I don't know what their revenue rate. I looked, I think in a recent article, it was somewhere around like maybe 40 million or something like that. So a great business, but obviously not at the level of some of these energy drinks we talked about with the Monsters and the Red Bull. But I don't necessarily think that they're even trying to compete against them anytime soon in the short term. They're really focused on like targeted, personalized kind of appeal of like these use cases around their products. They're saying they used to have one like for golfers. They used to have
they still have it, Golferade.
Yeah, so they have these different like things we're saying like, hey, these are underserved audiences that buy a lot of products, and we're going to produce products for them. And I think that's where you're going to see, like, if we're going to continue on the energy drink play here, it's like you're going to see that like personalization or like kind of fragmenting the market. You also are seeing that with just like with a company like a Cellucor that has more of like the neuro or nootropic focus type of a product,
right.
Like kind of take down the caffeine a little bit, but increase some other nutraceutical type of ingredient, cognizant and things of that nature. And I think you're seeing that kind of play out because people are saying, well, I don't know if I want to keep consuming 300 or more milligrams of energy or caffeine in an energy drink. Am I okay with 150 or 200? And if I have some other ingredients in there, is that better for me? So I think that's kind of starting to happen as well, to kind of pivot out of the energy side. You mentioned proteins. One product that I saw recently get a lot more interesting is with like Vital Proteins with like their collagen protein water. I mentioned them, I think, when we were giving away awards. I like their packaging on their like just regular ready to mix powders and things like that. And I talked about them having a collagen water offering, but now they're coming out with ones that are like much more positioned towards like our world of kind of more of the sport world. I think they just have a bunch of products in GNC with like maybe 20 or so grams of collagen protein in each drink. And, they're really trying to kind of push that collagen protein subcategory into the mainstream, because if you're going to pick up a protein beverage at this point, it's usually either going to be plant protein or it's going to be, a milk protein coming from, a Cytosport or a Premier Protein or Labrada or something like that. Other than that, I mean, you don't really have these kind of fringe ones that are coming out. So I think they're going to really push that like collagen play coming up.
Yeah, and you can transition, and we talked about Redcon 1 before on the show, like their MRE Light RTD, which is a non-dairy-based protein. It's the first basically animal-based protein that's not dairy, I think, in the market. That's an RTD, and I got samples sent to me, and they're phenomenal. They're fantastic. So they're in that category, the protein category, as you mentioned, like that. I'm not saying it's oversaturated at all. It's just been untapped. Like you had your main players in Premier and Muscle Milk or Cytosport, and that was it. Like then you started to kind of get some of these plant-based ones. You walk into a Whole Foods and you go to the refrigerated beverage section, you'll see a ton of plant-based RTDs now. But I'm not saying that they never will, but it's going to take a while for those to get in the C-stores. It's going to take a while for those to get in the gas stations, just because it's not something that even if you go to Whole Foods today, they're not sold left and right off these shelves. There's still issues in terms of mixability and taste that they need to figure out. Plant-based protein will eventually get into mainstream everywhere, including C-stores, but we're just not there yet. So I think it is something like Raycon 1 MRE Light RTD going to do it. I mean, that might be weird for people too, like a beef-based protein. Yeah, that might not be an easy sell, but it's an area in which Muscle Milk or Cytosport and Premier Pro have just been able to sit on top of that mountain and say, listen, you don't have a choice when you walk into a BP gas station or whatever it might be. Like you're buying. Basically, at that point, you're probably buying Cytosport Muscle Milk because they have all the C-stores covered. Or if you walk into maybe like a vitamin shop or something, it's Premier Pro, or a gym, you're going to buy that. Now, that's not to say like Optum Nutrition has some of their protein RTDs you see in gyms and whatnot, but primarily it's those two. And I've always said that the brands that come to me, it's like, how do you change the RTD category in protein? Because it's been kind of stagnant. Or it's been and not saying it's broken, but I'm saying there's got to be an opportunity there. And with collagen and with beef-based protein, and there's a lot of things that brands can do. And I think there are probably more brands out there thinking what they should do. Because the one thing too, even if it's flavors, Josh, like you don't see these big brands coming out with cool flavors like blueberry cobbler and apple pie or birthday cake. Yeah. Like they're just not. They're chocolate, vanilla, strawberry.
Yeah, I think it's a lot around the risk. I mean, like the hurdle to get into like a RTD protein beverage is high. Like to get line time, you're looking at multiple millions of dollars of an investment for an initial run. So, and that's a lot of times, depending on what you're running, like you're spending at least $1 million of flavor. Yeah. So you think about this in the context of our world, there's not a lot of people that have the money to be able to spend on that and also absorb the potential risk if something doesn't work out properly. So you have a lot of just the same players that have gotten up there because they've gotten the scale and they're able to do it. So not only like you have the struggles on the manufacturing side, like the cash side to actually do it, but then you also have to have the right team in place and the right product and everything. And to your point, like that's why you don't see necessarily like some of the plant proteins out in all the major sales channels, right. Or you don't see some of these like crazy flavors because the people that are buying this to the level that you need to actually make money, you have to you go with the plain Jane stuff. You go with the stuff that's tried and true because you don't necessarily have the ability to absorb the risk with some of these like more innovative things. And that's why, people are looking at it now because I think you're seeing finally some on the supply side, like on the manufacturing side, a little bit less of the cost hurdle. I still think you're years away before you can start to like have some of these more smaller brands kind of get into that space with, what we're talking about with like a Premier Pro or a Muscle Milk or something like that. But, you look at it and you say, this is a blue ocean because you say there's not a lot of competitors out there. Like, why do I want to compete with my protein powder where there's 10,000 protein powders? And right. I can only count 10 or so competitors on the RTD beverage. Let's roll with it. But then you put all the other things in play and you go, oh, like we're just not ready for that. Yeah. That's not gonna, it's not gonna work for us.
I think you brought up a good point earlier too, when you said something about producing energy drinks. I believe you mentioned this. It's not cheap. You can. Here's why. I'm not saying it's okay. I shouldn't say it's not that it's cheap, but it's hard to get it taken care of because a lot of these beverage companies are are packing beverages for multiple different brands, whether Coke, Pepsi, Budweiser, many of these different drinks who are in cans. And now you're going to run, a size of X amount of cans compared to, say, Budweiser. They're not going to put you in a schedule quickly. Yeah. They are okay saying, you know what, you're going to have to wait 4 months because we got all this orders and volume that we need to produce for Anheuser-Busch or whatever it might be, or maybe it's PepsiCo. Like, it's really hard to do it. So that's why, like, within our field, a lot of these companies now are saying, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to buy my own manufacturing equipment like Rep Sports did with Raise. They don't have to wait. They can produce and get out. They don't have to worry about, can you imagine, like, if the number one selling flavor of Bang sold out and then they couldn't get on the schedule for 6 weeks to produce more? Like, that's not how you run a business. You have to forecast for that. So it's difficult. It's expensive to buy all your own shit, though. I mean, it's a risk. I will tell you this. Speaking with Chris and Lex over at Rep Sports, they knew when they bought the equipment to purchase or to make Raise, if Raise wasn't a success, they were going out of business. Rep Sports would have been out of business, and the NutriKey brand would have been hurting because they spent a lot of money on that to make this work. So it's a huge risk to do it. Now, that's not to say you can't do it. I mean, it's definitely possible. I know, there are bottling companies everywhere that do things. It's just sometimes it's difficult depending on volumes to get onto the schedule. A couple other things that I think here as we sort of bring this back full circle, when we look towards the future of functional beverage. I mean, you look at, like, we mentioned some of these brands on here that like Celsius, is it Celsius, right? Celsius is like the thermogenic fat burning thing. They've done really cool in terms of approaching it differently. I see a lot of people drink that, by the way, like in the gym setting. I see a lot of people drink that. There's an O2 natural recovery drink, which I actually have a couple of those in my fridge. But the common theme that I'm starting to see now, and your boy Jack over at Bang has done it. This O2 drink has done it. But again, we talk about this on the Functional Food podcast as well, but this premise of CBD infused X. And that is where I am seeing a lot of this stuff going now with Bang coming out with Stoked. I actually had one of those the other day. Shockingly, it was good. I really enjoyed it. Now I didn't feel any effect in terms of the CBD stuff, but there's CBD infused recovery waters. I think that this trend, like, as soon as the government figures out how they really want to, like, regulate this and approach this and what claims you can make and what you can't make, that's going to be the area in which brands are going to be like, all right, let's do it. I mean, I'm sure there are brands like, Pepsi, I think, or Coke right now either makes one or they have a formula for CBD infused. Is there a CBD infused Monster that's maybe across seas? Or is it,
no,
Coke?
I mean, I think everybody at this point, like from an R&D perspective, I'm pretty sure almost every beverage company has something in line ready to go, or they have some investments through whatever to have one already in market, maybe in Canada or something like that legally. So you're seeing everybody kind of already get ready. They're all posturing up ready for it. I think the only one, maybe Coca-Cola was the only one that the CEO publicly has kept to say, he's like, we're not going down that path, even though I'm sure they still are, but it's one of those things where I don't know if he wants to show his hand publicly. But I mean, CBD beverages in general, I mean, I think that it's probably going to have the ones that are going to be the most successful are going to be the ones that are relatable. Mm-hmm. So I think you're going to see like a carbonated soft drinks or things like that have CBD infused in it, because the mainstream is going to be what drives CBD, the adoption of CBD to be this $25 billion industry. It's not going to be sports buyers, or it's not going to be these like fringe products that have a bunch of adaptogens or this, that, or whatever. I mean, those might be the catalysts to get it started, but it's going to be something like Pepsi calming or something, you know what I mean? Where like it helps you out in that world, whatever their kind of use cases that they're allowed to play off of because the FDA says so. It's going to be, I think that's going to be where you're going to see this, but I think we're only like just hitting like the first step of like this beverage CBD play. Like I don't think this is even getting any closer. I talked a bunch of times on my channel, and then I think a few times even on our podcast around a company called Recess, mm-hmm. which I think is probably one of the better ones like that is out there. Very risky to be out there to the level in which they are. A couple other companies, I think like Day Trip and a few other ones that have like done a pretty good job at building a beverage brand solely around CBD beverages, and not necessarily like just, hey, this is a whatever type of drink and we've added some CBD. It's actually like a whole platform that they've built around like the use cases or feelings around that, and not thinking about it as like a commodity, thinking about it as like this is kind of a bigger play here. So I like where CBD is going, but I know going into Expo West here in a few weeks, I'm going to be, I think I mentioned it too. I'm going to have to start asking the question more, what is in this before I consume it? Because a lot of times I'm just so used to just trying products when I'm there, but I might end up walking out with like 2 or 3 grams of CBD by the time I walk out the door over those couple of days.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I just looked at the Recess brand. First off, the branding is beautiful. Like the packaging is beautiful. So you're right, absolutely right. As we wrap up the episode here, Josh, let me ask you. Put you in a seat. You are going to develop a functional beverage company or drink. Where are you going right now in 2020? In January of 2020, where are you investing your money, and what would you call it? What would the Shaw functional beverage drink of choice be?
I guess I'm going to ask you one question before I answer this: am I trying to get a quick return, or am I going to be patient?
Let's go patient. I think it makes it a better answer.
So I think for me, like, I think I'm playing off of like more of the holistic wellness play. I'm going to go back to like same with like Eastern medicine of like more of the adaptogens, the elixirs, the, trying to get into this idea of like mindfulness or like the anxiety economy. I think that's going to be where we all end up happening. Like, we're already so over caffeinated, we're already so like packed, and our schedules are so busy, and we are struggling to like stay in the game. And I think that eventually somebody raises their hand, one of these big companies, and says, we need to come out with something to like help push us back to like the middle here. And I think that that's going to be where this all kind of goes, is like more towards this anxiety, mindfulness. And I would probably focus most of my attention on like things that could be around like plant-based, just because I think overall, I think that's where more the consumer share of the dollars are going, regardless if I, am one of those people that consumes any type of, vegetarian, vegan, alt meat. I'm not one of those consumers, but I'm a watcher of other people, and I know that a lot of people are buying that stuff. And if I'm building a company, I'm going where the money's kind of going. I'm not going to try to fight the trend.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason we picked plant-based is because of that big plant fucking wall behind you, which probably has all the ingredients you need in it. So you're set to go. For me, yeah, I think that the whole theme of cognitive enhancement is kind of where I'm at. I mean, this whole premise of or concept of nootropics is still relatively new. I mean, it hasn't really picked up mainstream yet. But I think what's interesting is anytime I give like a nootropic to a higher level executive, they absolutely love it. And I think when they try it more and more, and now a lot of people don't like popping pills. They think it's weird or mixing a powder. So like Cellucor just came out with that Smart Energy or whatever it's called, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's where I would go because, A, I'm passionate about that. I think the mind-muscle connection or the nootropics are amazing. I use them every single day. I'm more productive when I take them. But it would be nice to have just a canned beverage that tastes good, that's carbonated, that provides those ingredients, like you mentioned, some of the anti-anxiety stuff too. You can have like your theanines in there, your alpha GPCs, et cetera. That I personally would really like. The other thing, which I think is far-fetched that we haven't really gotten there yet, is this whole concept of gut health and digestive health. I mean, if you can create a beverage that's the instructions are like drink this with every meal to help you digest what you take, and it tastes good, you might be onto something. If people can really, or if they're able to digest this big ass meal they just had at a restaurant or at home, and all they have to do is drink a 12-ounce can of whatever it might be an easier way to actually improve gut health, which those of us within the fitness world know that they always say like everything starts within the gut. It really does. And I think the more and more research that comes out on that, the more and more educated people are going to be. But yeah, I mean, what better way to be able to digest that Big Mac from McDonald's if you can sip down a nice 16-ounce digestive health, good tasting carbonated beverage. If you guys like what you heard on this episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're on iTunes, Spotify, over on YouTube as well. We're on Facebook at 2 Guys 1 Shaker Cup, Josh Shaw Consulting. You can go there and then request anything from him or a fitness informant for us. Any topics for the show, make sure you hit us up. We will discuss them on a future episode. Until next time, I guarantee you, I'm not going to guarantee it, but I would say I would be shocked if that green screen behind you, Josh, is still in existence in 6 months after you start this beverage company. I think you're going to start to pick out your herbs and create the Josh Shaw drink of choice.
Definitely.